hand it over to you now.
All right, thank you. Welcome tonight. I'm glad you joined us. Um, and we'll talk about native sedges and grasses and how it can be an alternative to your traditional lawn. I've been a master gardener since 2015. Um, the native part has been a journey over the past probably 5 or 6 years. And at the end of this, I'll still show you my work in progress, which doesn't look like what I, how have you been spending that long at the time doing what I've been doing? But um, let's get started. The suburban lawn, as all of you who have listened to any of my previous talks know, is really a sterile wasteland. It doesn't support any of our pollinators. It uses a lot of resources, creates a lot of greenhouse gases with the mowing, um, fossil fuel with the gasoline that we use for the mowing, and puts a lot of nitrogen and other things that are harming our water system by with rain runoff from the fertilizers and herbicides and pesticides that we put on there. And it costs us a lot of money. Whereas grasses and sedges can offer pollen and other important nesting sites and shelters and host plants for our native insects and further along our food chain so that we are more likely to continue to have the food that we need to eat. So, how do we prepare what we want to do? And this is going to seem a little bit overwhelming. So, hang in there because after we talk about doing perhaps a whole lawn or a whole large area, I will offer some alternatives that might be more suitable to still keep your front lawn presentable, but do away with a lot of the lawn and make it workable and affordable to work on. So some of the ways you can do it is you can starve the grass by covering the area the grass you want to get rid of with cardboard, a heavy tarp. We have used 4 or 5 layers of newspaper, um, and then put mulch on it over. Usually we would do it in the fall and it would be fine by spring for planting, but it does, for about 6 or 8 weeks. Soil solarization is sort of along the same way, although you use a heavy grade plastic tarp and you use the heat from the sun, and that will kill the grass and the weeds and everything, but it also kills anything else that's under that plastic if it's not able to move out from under it. And it can take even a couple of years from what I understand in that, because we just don't have that much heat in our area. The weed bank seed depletion is a method where you can till the soil to until everything under, and then you allow everything to grow back until it's about 3 inches, and you till again, and you keep repeating this until you get no growth. Obviously, it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. Um, you can use herbicides, which is what if you have someone come in and tell you they're going to put in a no-mow lawn or something like that, a lawn service, they're going to want to use probably a herbicide. If you use one, just make sure you use one that's registered in our state and that allows for you to use it in your setting and follow all the safety instructions for it. Sod removal is probably the most intensive labor and costly method, and it will remove all of your topsoil along with the sod, all the beneficial microbes that are in it. The same with your seed bank depletion. You're really getting rid of a lot of the beneficial microbes that are in those first few inches of soil. So it will take some time for that to come back to the level that it was before you had started. So you think, oh my goodness, there's no way I can do this. So some of the compromises or alternatives is to plant out beds where you're going to put in native sedges and grasses, create paths that you're going to mow between them and around them. That would work in most suburban or village settings and still give you a lawn that your neighbors won't say, what are you doing? And or your homeowners association won't come and fine you for, etc., because it really looks like you've created a well-maintained lawn. But doing this is best to do it any of this in the spring or early fall. And this method will gradually let you enlarge your native plantings so that it makes the cost and the work more doable. My experience is, for me and for some other people I know who have done hold this, is you take on too big of a project, you go out and you spend more money than you really want to on plants, and then come July or August when they need a lot of love and a lot of care, you don't have the time to do that, so you've lost the whole project, and then you feel defeated and why am I bothering type of attitude. Whereas if you start smaller and work up to bigger, you can create what you want in a doable fashion. Other alternatives, if you really say, I'm not going to mow, I'm tired of mowing and I really have a small area, I'm going to do the whole thing at once. Kissy Boys of Cornell Botanical Gardens actually used a species of diathonia oat grass, and it worked as an alternative to the traditional turf grass, and they only mowed it a few times a year there at the Botanical Gardens. It is a little bit more of a higher growing lawn than you may traditionally have, but it does give you an overall green, well-maintained look. And you could add white clover to your existing lawn. White clover doesn't need to be really mowed. It does attract bees. And I know people go, oh, I don't want bees in my yard. They sting and my kids are out there. Most native bees do not sting except when their nests are bothered. And then only the female bees will sting. So the bees aren't really the things that sting to the worst of it. It's usually the wasp that people have been stung with, and that can cause a problem. And the clover will withstand some foot traffic, because when you think about the question that I proposed, how much lawn do you really need? You need, you may want lawn for your children to play on, or for your dogs to have a place to go out and run around and romp on. You know, so that you may want some lawn and need it for a beneficial purpose. How do you go about getting these plants? Because if you go and look on the websites and find that a plant costs $7 or $8, how do you go about getting enough of those to populate a large area? Well, you can start your own seeds and create plug trays, or you could buy the plug trays from some of the different native plant places. And plugs are young plants that are cultivated in individual cells, and they're usually ready or almost ready for transplanting. If you decide to start your own seeds, I really suggest that you do some research before you just order a bunch of packets of native sedges and grasses and stuff, because many of them are not the easiest to get started. Most of them need some cold stratification. Some of them need warm, cold, and then cold, and then warm again. Some of them need cold, warm, and cold. So it's not an easy process. And then if you just spread the seed over an area, you're in competition with all the birds, the squirrels, the chipmunks that will think this is a great meal. And it may take up, and the grass and weeds may come back because they may fly in off the air. The birds may drop them. So you'll be battling the weeds and stuff that you don't want. And you have to decide whether that little plant is what you planted or whether it's something you don't want. And it can take a while to establish. But whatever process you use, you have to be willing to invest a lot of patience, time, and love. So my suggestion is to think about the area you want, start fairly small, and then go from there. So some of the things that you might want to think about, and many of them, I heard or saw in the chat that many people want their, they can't do it in their front yard because it has to look presentable, et cetera, et cetera. You have to realize that our traditional lawn was a marketing strategy from seed companies and from fertilizer companies back in the 40s and 50s when they were losing some of their business that they'd previously had elsewhere. So they decided by creating this idea that a beautiful weed-free lawn meant status, it increased their profit lines. So that, but some of these sedges and grasses are short. They can certainly look well maintained even in the front yard, such as the common wood sedge, which is a great foliage plant. It has grass-like leaves that form attractive, low-growing troughs. It looks great in front of a border or along path edges. As with most of the sedges, they all bloom, but the flowers are really inconsequential. As you can see, they're very small on this. And you'll find that most of them are pretty adaptable to the amount of sun or shade they need and to the soil moisture. And they host a lot of moths, and moths are really important pollinators in our food chain. People don't sometimes realize that because they tend to be more active in the evening or at night, and we're not as aware of them, but they're quite important in our food chain. The Bristol leaf sedge is another short sedge. We'll start with the short ones and work up to the more dramatic grasses. And it grows in tidy round clumps with thin narrow leaves, as you can see, very much grass-like. And many think it looks like a little sea urchin until it kind of grows together. And as you can see, once again, very adaptable to sun, moisture, and very beneficial to our pollinators. The path rush is really not a sedge, but it's certainly a grass-like native plant. It's short. It grows very well in drier areas, whereas even though the others are adaptable, they may not flourish quite as much if the area is dry, whereas this might. And it tolerates some foot traffic. So that if you got an area that has some light foot traffic, this would probably hold up. Pennsylvania sedge is one of the more available sedges. Most of the native gardening stores have this available. It's short, it's grass-like, and very adaptable to others. And just so you know, many of these pictures came from a native nursery, Prairie Moon Nursery, which is in the Midwest. Some of them are from my yard, but some of them are from their website. I want to give them credit for their pictures that I borrowed. The plantain leaf sedge, another short sedge. It's semi-evergreen. It's also wind pollinated, which means that you will get some dense clumps that you can divide and have essentially free plants from to enlarge your beds with every few years, and does very well in the shade. It does prefer a little moister soil, but if it's in the shade, you might have moister soil. in that area, it might not dry out as much. The broadleaf sedge looks very much like the plantain. The leaves are a little bit broader. It's once again, it's semi-evergreen in the winter and very adaptable it's adaptable more in the sun all the way to the shade. The blue grama grass is a little bit taller as we move into some of the taller grasses. Um, it has that greenish red to purple summer blooms that are a little bit more obvious than some of the shorter sedges. It does like sun more than it does okay in partial sun, but it's not going to get as tall and you're not going to get the blooms as not going to get as many blooms as you would in the in full sun. The purple love grass is a pretty available grass once again in a lot of the native gardening centers. It is a very attractive grass. The new growth comes up out of the dry foliage from the previous year. In the summer, it develops this airy purple uh, mass of flowers that is quite stunning. And then as the season grows into later fall, they turn bronze and continue to be very attractive. And like I said, it is pretty available as a grass. Poverty oat grass can has a wide range of growth from 6 to 24 inches. Um, and it's very adaptable to from sun to partial shade. It's very grass-like, so that certainly would work in substitution for grass. Sweetgrass is an interesting grass and is of significant importance for many First Nations or Native Americans. They use it for smudging and for braiding. It spreads by rhizomes and benefits from division. So once again, you can have some free plants in a few years. It has a very sweet fragrance when it's dry, which is why it's so beneficial for the smudging. And it is as well available at a couple of the local native nurseries I saw on their websites as I was looking to see what was available for people, just so that you would know. And I will give you a list of those at the end of the talk. Side oak grama grass kind of looks like, some people think the flowers look like eyelashes. It provides a nesting site for some of our native bees. As you can see, the flowers are kind of greenish red blooms in midsummer to early fall. It does well in average to dry soil. And it's available as well as some of our local native nurseries. Witch grass gets its name because people think that it can look like a witch's broom. Other people think that like an explosion of fireworks, but the flowers are very attractive in a setting. Can get a little bit taller, up to 3 feet. It does like the sun, and is a very attractive mid-level grass. Prairie drop seed can be a shorter grass or a shorter grass as you see here. It gets probably partial shade because this is from my yard. And as you see we'll see at the end, I have more shade than sun. But it says it can get up to 3 foot tall. It has nice, tight little clumps of grass-like foliage. The flowers are very inconspicuous. It does turns a tan golden color in the fall, keeps its shape into winter until we get all the heavy snow um, that tends to cover the plant up completely. Sand drops, and once again, the prairie drop seed is pretty available at our native nurseries, local native nurseries as well. The sand drop seed has very attractive blooms. It's aromatic, and what it smells like, I guess, depends upon the person. I am interested in seeing if I can find some this year to see what it smells like for me, because the literature says it can smell any like coriander, cilantro, soap, buttered popcorn, licorice, or sunflower seeds. So it will be interesting to see what I would think it would smell like. It does like sun, so I'll have to find a sunny spot to try to put it if I can find some. Because I didn't find it at any of our local nurseries on the website. But fox sedge is a taller sedge. The blooms kind of look like miniature um, bristly bottle brushes. Um, it's fine from sun to partial shade. It likes average soil to wet, um, and certainly something to look for. Northern sea oats is pretty regularly available at some of our native nurseries as well. It's a little bit taller, so we're moving into some of the taller grasses. The blooms are very attractive, blowing their with a little bit of breeze or in the wind. As you can see them there, they're kind of a green, and in the fall they turn golden. They can be picked and used in floral arrangements for the fall. The plant holds itself upright through the first, at least through the early winter. I mean, when we get the heavy snow like we had this year, nothing stands up, I don't think. Um, but it is a very attractive plant, and it does spread slowly. I have it in my yard, and it has developed several clumps, which is welcome in that I can divide it and spread it around. And once again, I welcome being able to create plants from what I already have. Little blue stem is once again another readily available grass at our native nurseries. It it gets up to 3 foot tall. It does like the sun. It does hold up to throughout the winter to some extent. It has a creamy white seed head in the late summer to fall, and is a larval host to the common nymph butterflies as well as several skippers. And the skippers are somewhere between a butterfly and a moth, and kind of the little tiny, what you might think are butterflies that kind of dart around throughout during the summer. The common hairgrass is a grass that's very useful for dry shade. It tolerates dry conditions. It does well in the shade. It has a very airy, delicate flower that is attractive, particularly in the shade, because it's of a kind of a lighter color. Um, and the seed heads and plant will stand up in the beginning of the winter, so that it is gives you some winter interest. Bottle brush grass is available at some of our native nurseries, local native nurseries as well. Many people think the blooms look like a bottle brush. It can be a dramatic plant in that it can reach up to 5 feet tall. So it would be great in the center of a bed with shorter grasses all the way and sedges around it, or up at the back of a garden. The flowers like I said, are very attractive. It does well in the shade. Um, and um, will hold up somewhat in the winter. It's self-seeding, so it creates the colonies that and allows you to spread them throughout your yard, so you get more. The Canadian blue joint is a very attractive grass, and natively you would find this naturally. You would find this along in marshes, along ponds. It does need very wet soil. But if you have a very wet area, this would be an attractive native grass to put there. It The leaves are kind of bluish colored during the growing season, and then it forms the tan seed heads that will hold up into early winter. Canadian ryegrass is a fairly common grass as well. The spikes kind of look like they have whiskers. I have some of this in my yard as well. So even though it says it has sun and partial to partial sun, mine doesn't get any taller than 3 foot. But I think that probably if it was in full sun, it could be very dramatic at 5 foot. It's adaptable to most soil conditions, like many of our grasses and sedges are. Switchgrass is also a grass that you'll be able to find locally. It's clump forming and can reach dramatic heights of 6 foot tall. The flowering heads are very attractive, kind of wispy, and when the as in the breeze, and the seed heads smell like popcorn, supposedly. Indian grass is also available locally. It can be dramatic as well, up to 7 foot tall. The seed heads are flowers and seed heads are very attractive. Um, it does well in a variety of sun exposures as well as soil, and is a beneficial to some of our pollinators. Big blue stem, which is really of no relation to little blue stem. They're totally different uh, families and genuses. Is a big plant. Gets 3 to 8 foot. Um, Grass-like, very dramatic. It does like the sun. And it, once again, is pretty available at some of our native local nurseries. So work in progress. This is what my front yard looks like. I want you to know. Right on the other side of those trees is our road. We are lucky in that we live in an area where lawns were discouraged by the developer, and herbicides, fertilizers, lawn services were pretty much not used as long as he was living here. Now that he's moved away, some people on the street have resorted to lawn services, and I do see those trucks putting out signs that say do not walk on the area because chemicals have been applied. But as you can see, it's full of grasses. You can see some wild raspberry up close front. Right near the bottom of the slide, it looks pretty bare because we had some septic work done this year, and it created a huge empty area, which gave me the opportunity to truly try my planting some native perennials and seeing if I could make my little spot of meadow like I would like. And have been in the process of trying to take out some of the lower limbs every couple of years to create a little bit more sun. But we truly don't get a lot of sun, and we have and the ferns do very well. I have a rather large patch of ferns that do well, but it's very great. But some of the things that I do have that does well are the northern oats, Pennsylvania sedge, Perry dropseed, and some switchgrass, which um, is struggling, but it's survived several years, so I think it will make it. Um, so that even after 3 concentrated years of trying to do something out here, um, it doesn't look like much has been done, but there was a lot of work put in. So some of our local resources are here. They are I have been to most of them. They have good plants. They have knowledgeable people, and you can find a good assortment of native plants. When you go to buy native plants, try to avoid buying something that has a fancy name. Um, Try to get just the Latin names and not something that's been named, because those are generally cultivars or something. And many of our insects cannot use the cultivars for as a larval source or for food, depending upon how they have been altered. So just as you look, just be a wise consumer. Questions?